Good afternoon or good evening, everyone, depending on which part of the world you're joining us from. And welcome to the opening session of this three-part lecture series titled Israel Studies After October 7th, jointly organized and hosted by the Azrieli Institute of Israel Studies at Concordia University and Mali, the Azrieli Center for Israel Studies, located at the beautiful Sde-Boker campus of Ben-Gurion University. My name is Csaba Nikolényi. I'm director of the Azrieli Institute at Concordia, also professor of political science. And I will be moderating today's as well as the next two sessions. As we sadly know, October 7th changed all of our lives. The worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust devastated families and entire communities in the Negev. For the past month, the ugly head of anti-Semitism has been quickly reawakened, and it is now engulfing the streets and, sadly, university campuses as well in the Western democratic world, Canada included. Only last week on our own campus at Concordia, we had to witness a violent assault on Jewish students, accompanied by calls on them to go back to Poland. In 2023, Canadian Jews, Jewish Canadians, are told to go back to Poland. Clearly, something has gone very wrong in our method of education, in the imparting of knowledge, and in our teaching of students the art of reasoned debate substantiated with solid evidence in the never-ending quest for truth, which is what the academy and the university should be all about. So more than ever, we thought that we needed to take a fresh look at and raise new questions about how we teach and explain the Jewish story, of which the Israeli story is, of course, an integral part. So in collaboration with Mali, the Azrieli Center for Israel Studies at BGU Sde-Boker, which we used to regularly visit with our Concordia student group every summer, the Canadian Associates of Ben-Gurion University Ben-Gurion University, and Startup Nation, Concordia University's first and only student club that was formed to represent Israeli students on our campus in Montreal, we believed that it was important and timely to share with you some new perspectives on the essential debates that define and shape Israeli history and Israel studies. So every week we will meet online at the same time, every Monday at 1 o'clock Montreal Eastern Standard Time, in order to discuss with Mali's, the Azrieli Center's leading researchers, the following themes. Today, we will be talking about the question, what Ben-Gurion would say, October 7th, looking back and searching for answers. A week from today, on November 20th, we will be looking at understanding the Zionist idea, an essential toolkit for combating distortion. And 2 weeks from today, on November 27th, we will address the topic of decolonizing decolonization, revisiting Jewish histories in the Middle East. And today, I would like to open this session by introducing very briefly so that they would have more time to actually share their perspective and knowledge with us, our three speakers. Our first speaker will be Professor Avi Bareli, who is currently serving as director of Mali of the Azrieli Center in Sde-Boker, and he will tell us about unity, activism, and sovereign independence in David Ben-Gurion's political thought. Professor Bareli, of course, is a very well-known and established scholar of Israeli Zionist history and Ben-Gurion's work and legacy in particular. Let me just mention, two of his important publications, Authority and Participation in a New Democracy, Political Struggles in Mapai between 1948 and 1953, as well as his work on Mapai in Israel's early independence period, which, when it was published in Hebrew in 2007, received the Ben-Tzvi Prize the following year. As I understand, currently Professor Bareli is putting together a collection of Ben-Gurion's writings and speeches in a collection that will be called Ben-Gurion's Political Thought. Our second speaker is Dr. Avi Sherzer, who will discuss crisis, challenge, and opportunity in Ben-Gurion's world. Dr. Sherzer is a senior lecturer at the School of Education of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where his research focuses on the history of Israeli education, culture, and the public sphere. Currently, Adi is conducting research on the educational cultural work of the Israeli Chief Rabbinate as a state church, quote unquote, and completing an ISF, Israeli Science Foundation, supported research on Mamlaktiyut and American Jewry. And of course, Adi has very long and intimate ties and connections with the Boker campus and Mali. And last, but certainly not least, my dear friend and colleague, Professor Paula Kabalo, who will be talking about, if we do not take a stand in the Negev, Tel Aviv will not stand. A sober reading of Ben-Gurion's security presuppositions. Dr. Kabalo was founding director of Mali, the Azrieli Center at Boker Ben-Gurion, and I want to stress that her most recent publication, Israeli Community Action, Living Through the War of Independence, a book that was published in 2020 by Indian University Press, was also a recipient of the Association for Israel Studies Shapiro Prize for the best book that year published in the field of Israel Studies. What a panel. Were it not for the sad context, I would express delight and joy that we can have these very special colleagues and friends together on the screen. I'm not going to use that word. I'm not going to express joy and happiness. Rather, I open the session with an invitation first to Avi, then Adi and Paula to tell us what we need to know and remember as we rethink and as we raise new questions about Israeli history. Avi, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, my good friend Chaba. Just a correction, a small correction. I'm not the head. I'm not the manager of Mali. My good friend Paula is still the manager of Mali, and I substituted her in being the director of Ben-Gurion Institute, which incorporates Mali. I will address here the concept of unity from the point of view of Ben-Gurion, from the point of view of Ben-Gurion's political thought and praxis. The reason why we choose this topic is because the war caught us in a moment of grave division. The Israeli society lately, during the last year, at least the last year, was almost torn apart in conflicts around the desirable democratic regime, around the relation between state and religion, and between religious people and non-religious, maybe anti-religious people in Israel, and around the long, influential and controversial leadership of Netanyahu, of Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, the war caught us in this junction, highly sensitive junction in Israel, in the Israeli society. There are debates about whether the connection between the attack we suffered and the situation in Israel before that. But anyway, nowadays, during the first weeks of this war, but which we don't know to what extent it will last, unity idea of unity, the striving towards unity, preoccupies much of the political discourse in Israel. Everybody strives to or most part of the Israel parts of the Israeli society are striving to enhance the unity in Israel. So, from one point of view, it reveals unity is revealed undoubtedly in the common struggle, war struggle that unifies the Israelis. From another point of view, which is not necessarily contradicting, the striving towards unity attests to the fact that we are not simply united. We have to struggle to get together. Now, this is a particular moment in Israel, it's not an unusual, it's not a usual junction in Israel, but this tension between diversity and unity, between and the tension to a conflictual discourse is typical to Jews all over the world, and to Jews all over, through their history. Being disunited and striving to unite is something typical to Jews. We are a diversified people, divided people, striving as an ideal all the time to be united, and there is no and the one is stemming from the other, because we are not simple Icelanders. I don't know. I simple collective that is united around simple things that unites it. We are. We have unity as an ideal. I think this is typical Jewish. Now, Ben-Gurion, David Ben-Gurion, whom I'm going to talk now, is also from this point. This is one of the aspects in which Ben-Gurion is a typical Jewish leader. He himself, as Zionism as a whole, was forced to accommodate, to struggle with a highly diversified Jewish reality from one point of view, highly pluralistic and divided Jewish people, and from the other, and his reaction and Zionism's reaction to this was putting unity as an ideal, as something we have to strive for achieving, and that's why this is the deep reason why the unity is one of the most important aspects of his political thought. Now, I won't be able to. I don't have a lot of time here, and I don't want to bother you. So I want to place the idea of unity in the. My modest aim here is to place the idea of unity in the general framework of Ben-Gurion's political thought and praxis. This is my goal here. Now, I want to do it in my limited time through one particular window, a very important speech delivered by Ben-Gurion in the year 1944 which was which is included in the volume Chaba already mentioned before, and also in an English anthology made by Rabbi Abraham Herzberg. And this speech got the highly illuminating title, "The Imperative of the Jewish Revolution." You can say imperatives or demands or commandments maybe, but imperatives may serve well. And this highly important speech delivered in a crucial time like the year 1944, in which in this speech Ben-Gurion articulated three main ideas: pioneering, unity, and sovereign independence. These are the three most important. It's a long speech with a lot of details, but these are the most important imperatives that Ben-Gurion saw in the year 1944 as the imperatives of what he called Jewish revolution, meaning Zionism. Zionism equates Jewish revolution. Now, because this speech is highly important, it enables us to because of the gravity of that historical junction, in the midst of the Holocaust, in 1944, Ben-Gurion delivers this speech, and I think this, because of the time and the importance of this speech, it enables us to understand the place of the concept unity in Ben-Gurion's political and thought and praxis. Now, 1948, as I have already said, it's almost 2 years after the official announcement of the Zionist the official announcement of the Yishuv and the Zionist organization about the actual process of the Holocaust. It is, of course, the worst nadir, I think the most nadir times in the entire Jewish history. We are dealing with a low moment, a very low moment in terms of the impotency the Jews suffered during modern time, I think, during the whole of their history. Now, Ben-Gurion assumes leadership 9 years before that. And he assumes leadership when the European Jews, which comprised back then the vast majority of the Jewish people, when the European Jews were already in the midst of a crisis, ongoing crisis, beginning in the 20s, in the 20s, and Ben-Gurion became the leader of the Yishuv, the Jewish community in Eretz Israel, and one of the two leaders of Zionism in the year 1935. 10 years or so after the beginning of this crisis, culminating later to the Holocaust, to the Holocaust during the 40s. Now, so Ben-Gurion became a leader in a time of a great, the gravest impotency the Jewish people ever experienced. And he became a leader without majority when his party split into two parties, the people that rejected an important part of his political plan, meaning establishing a Jewish state in a partition as a result of partition of the land, broke away, and he was left in a party which a very important group of its leaders were siding with Chaim Weizmann against his own orientation into a conflict with the British, who were back then starting to implement a pro-Arabic and anti-Zionist policy, inflicting limitations on immigration and immigration of Jews into Israel. So he was a leader of one of the most important, or one of the two important leaders of Zionism during the years of unprecedented crisis, with no majority, with no real political basis, with a highly diversified society. So I think it is not surprising that he puts the idea of unity at the center of his vision. I would say, not only plan, vision. He is striving to unite this highly diversified collective called the Jewish people around political authority. That's the definition, maybe, of his political praxis. He is striving to concentrate this diversified group of people around political center. This is what Ben-Gurion, if I have to say something about what Ben-Gurion did during his long leadership, this is the main project of Ben-Gurion. So even though, if I consider unity among the other parts of his political thought, for example, pioneering and sovereign independence, unity is not the goal. The best society, according to Ben-Gurion, is not a unified society. A society is judged whether it intensifies the capacity of the potency, the agency of its members. Meaning, pioneering is the term used back then to express this idea. A good society is a society that is empowering its members, and pioneering is a code for this. And a good society is a free society that makes it itself as a collective and its members independent to the extent that they can be independent. These can be considered the main ideas according to Ben-Gurion. But because of the special historical situation of Ben-Gurion during this speech, and I think it is characterizing the whole leadership of Ben-Gurion also, because of the historical situation, unity is considered not only desirable, but a necessary condition, that should be conquered and we should seek it constantly through our history. I think to summarize this point, that this character of Ben-Gurion's leadership is highly relevant for us for our situation now, and it kept on. I only talked about, and I only talked today about the crucial years between the middle of the 30s to the middle or the end of the 40s. But if we consider, and this is my last remark here, if we consider the Ben-Gurion's leadership as a nation builder, a state builder after 1948, unity also represent a very important goal to achieve, which was because the Israeli society after the mass immigration of the 50s was all but not a unified society. It was highly heterogenic, much more than today. Much more. We are much more united today than we were ever during our history, from the beginning of Zionism back to now. So, I'll end my remarks here by saying that maybe the conflicts that preceded the war, the eruption of the war, maybe those conflicts represent not. That's my that's my judgment. You are not don't have to accept it, but I think those conflicts represent not the disintegration of the Israeli society as our enemies thought. They represent the fact that the various parts of Israeli society got together, got closer, and that's why they are quarreling much noisily and much in a manner of a crisis and sense of urgency. That's and I think I base my judgment. I also base this judgment by the fact that this sudden eruption of the war immediately unfolded the fact that we are much more united than we thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Avi, for this very powerful and insightful comparative contextualization of where we and Israel find ourselves today, and how that compares with the context as well as the solution that the founding prime minister of the nation envisioned. So thank you. An excellent platform for our departure as we continue with our next speaker, Dr. Adi Sherzer. Adi, please come on the screen.
Thank you, Chava. Maybe a word of introduction before diving into my perspective on the subject. So next Sunday would mark 50 years for the death of David Ben-Gurion. He passed away a short time after the 1973 war, which was, as we all know, we used to say it was the biggest challenge, or maybe the biggest crisis the state of Israel have ever coped with. I guess that trying to compare October 6th and October 7th, October 6, 1973 and October 7, 2023, I'm not sure which catastrophe is more influential, is influencing in a deeper way on the Israeli society. However, I'm addressing this subject, or I'm starting with this note, just to remind ourselves that Ben-Gurion is not here. And basically what we're doing is trying to draw insights from a person that lived in a different reality and had a different views about a different state than the current state of Israel. Having said that, I do believe that we can that the insights that we draw may be very insightful and very interesting while trying to better understand current reality in Israel. And from this point of departure, I want to go into my subject. I'm going to share a presentation mostly because I want to share a few quotes with you. So when we look at any political leader or national leader, we can try and analyze them using different angles. When it comes to Ben-Gurion, just for some reason I can't, okay. When we look at Ben-Gurion or any other state leader, we can speak about the person himself. We can speak about his biography, his unique background. We can speak about the leader, about our figure, historical figure as a leader, while focusing on the relationship between him and the people, looking at him as a person that leads a bunch of other people. And we can also take a look and focus on his way of thinking. And I want to focus on the third perspective and offer you what I see as a model of the way that Ben-Gurion coped with crisis. I'm going to do it by using a few historical examples. I guess we'll get into 3 major examples, and also try and give you a sense of Ben-Gurion writings in this context. And the first historical example I would like to focus is the First World War. Ben-Gurion at the time was not an important leader. He did his first step in leadership. He lived in Jerusalem. He was part of a group that edited a newspaper, not the most important newspaper at the time. It called The Unity, while Ha'achdut, if I would like to pick on where Avi stopped. And one of his main ideas that he shared in this newspaper, but also in other places, was the idea of connecting the Jewish Yishuv into the Ottoman Empire. He himself went to Istanbul together with Yitzhak Ben Zvi. They studied Ottoman law, and the basic idea was to integrate into this environment, thinking that that might be the key for a better Jewish future in the land of Israel. However, history went to a different direction. That idea proved to be very wrong, and Ben-Gurion himself found himself deported from Jaffa, first to Egypt, and afterwards he found himself in New York, while his whole way of thinking and his whole political thought proved to be in the most direct way irrelevant. So in many ways, this is the first crisis that we can identify in the life of Ben-Gurion as a leader. And the coping with this crisis was quite interesting, because when we're looking at Ben-Gurion's writings about this crisis, we can see that he spent no time reflecting about the crisis itself, and immediately moving into speaking about challenge and even opportunity. So I'd like to read a small part of an article that he wrote in September 1950. He wrote it while being in New York, and he wrote the following. From the abyss of darkness that enveloped our people in this time of emergency, a ray of light is emerging. The desire for redemption is paving a path in the heart of the nation. The terrible catastrophe finally awakened the people. The people recognize that they have no hope outside of its own land. And the movement for the land of Israel, naming Zionism, came out of the narrow circle of the Zionist organization and became broad popular movement, which already unites almost all parts of the nation and its parties. And I have to stress how unique this perspective is. We're speaking about a very hard time for the Jewish people. We're speaking about a time in which German Jews are fighting French Jews. We're speaking about time where the Jews of the land of Israel, of the first and second Aliyah, were deported. Some of the leadership was deported outside of the land. Others were deported from the Sharon and the central parts of Israel to the Galilee. We're speaking about a very harsh poverty, a lack of food, and Ben-Gurion is looking at this horrible situation, and the main thing that he's saying, the main thing that he can see is a ray of light. And this is not something that we can see only in this case. This is the first time that we see it in his writing, but it is something that we can see again and again and again. Ben-Gurion is looking at a catastrophe and not spending too much time describing this catastrophe, and automatically looking at a finding an opportunity, immediately looking at it as a challenge. So if I want to take you into the process, we can say, we can mainly say that Ben-Gurion is looking at the situation in an ideological flexibility. In other words, he's not afraid to change his mind while looking at the catastrophe. He's changing his mind really quickly, adjusting to the new situation. He reads this new situation in a very deep way, trying to better understand it. He identifies the opportunities and immediately reframes the reality. If we want to take First World War as our example, so Ben-Gurion looks at First World War, quickly understand that his old ideas about becoming part of an Ottoman world is irrelevant, reads the situation, the new situation in a deep way, understand the new balance of power, identifies opportunity, understands that there's going to be a new world order afterwards, and this is the opportunity for the Jewish people, and therefore reframes the reality and use it in a different way, or understand it in a different way. This is not always easy to sell this way of looking at things, and it's also have a cost. We can see this cost in another interesting example a few years afterwards, in 1929, which is known as, in Hebrew, known as Tarpat, Praot Tarpat. Those are riots that broke out in the land of Israel. It's considered to be as the first national clash between Jews and Palestinians in the land of Israel. And we can see once again that Ben-Gurion is offering a different perspective on things. I'm going to read once again his words and then trying to explain why this perspective was considered as very problematic by Ben-Gurion's colleagues. So Ben-Gurion writes the following. You can see the same, once again, the same pattern, the same model. The assassination, meaning the killing of Jews all over the land of Israel, did not break the Yishuv. On the contrary, it forged its will and united its members. The Yishuv came out of this bloody test with honor. Not individuals, but the entire Yishuv met the attack with loyalty and heroism. A hidden light, once again, a hidden light, a ray of light, this is the kind of metaphors that Ben-Gurion uses again and again, which we were unaware of its existence, suddenly shown. The disaster that befell us renewed and sanctified the alliance between the people of Israel and the land of Israel. But in this context, Ben-Gurion's words were not accepted by the wider public, that looked at the riots as a disaster, looked at it as in a way, a red light that proves that it's going to be the whole Zionist project is going to be much more complicated than we thought, because there's going to be a national clash between Jews and Arabs. It's very far from the idealistic portrayal of things that was mostly described by Zionist thinkers in Europe. It became this criticism or this this skeptical look on Ben-Gurion optimistic view becoming even more relevant in the context of another historical event, which is World War II. Once again, a quote of Ben-Gurion writing in September 1939. Okay, right. It was 2 weeks after the invasion of Germany to Poland. Final solution is not there yet. However, the Jews of Germany have already suffered from anti-Semitism. Many of them were murdered. And Ben-Gurion once again offered to see this as an opportunity. So in many ways, that shows us the other side of the coin, the problematic nature of this very optimistic view of Ben-Gurion. And Ben-Gurion writes the following: as we stand now on the brink of the war, we must make clear to ourselves the path we will take, and the goal we will strive for. The World War in 1914 to 1918, the First World War, of course it wasn't, back then it was the World War because there was no Second World War, brought us the Balfour Declaration. This time we must bring about a Jewish state. So he's looking at the future, the very faraway future. It's a good thing. It's something that helps us understand Ben-Gurion as a visionary, as a person that can have a vision which is very far away. But it's also quite problematic in the context of World War II. We understand that this jump between the catastrophe into the opportunity is quite fast. It's also have its prices. In the context of the Holocaust, the major scholar that wrote about that is Tom Segev. And one of the interesting things, I'm not a great admirer of Tom Segev, but one of the interesting things that he captures in his book, The Seventh Million, is the fact that Ben-Gurion looked at these events in a very cold way. He understood his we may say his obligation as a leader to look at the historical reality in a very rational way, and by many means he did not spend time to deal with reality itself. He was already in the next step. That brings about a wider question about leadership. How do we would like to see our leaders? Do we like to see leaders that are focused on current reality, that are focused on present, people that can offer to their people comfort, warm words? Or we would like to see other kind of leaders that are focused on the future, that are focused on the next steps. What are the costs of each leader? In the context of Ben-Gurion, we can say in a very clear way that he was not the kind of leader that had warm words of comfort to his people. He was the kind of leader that was focusing on reality itself, that was focusing mostly on the future, not on the past and the present. Just as a side note, of course, this is a kind of leadership that we can see also with other historical leaders. We mentioned World War II. It's also the kind of leadership that we can see in the deeds of Churchill, the British Prime Minister. Would like to bring about a less historical example that will also give us another aspect of this Ben-Gurion's way of thinking, that is jumping between the crisis into making the crisis into a challenge and immediately into opportunity. And I want to take you a few years onwards to 1949. This is the end of the 1948 war. We are standing on the months in which Israel is finalizing its ceasefire agreements, and this a major question about Jerusalem, because according to the UN 1947 partition plan, which was pretty much irrelevant at the time because the IDF, the Israeli army, captured much of the land that was supposed to be an Arab Palestinian state, and this Arab Palestinian state was basically never founded because of the invasion of the other Arab armies. However, the question of Jerusalem remained open, and Jerusalem was still considered, although Israeli forces already conquered West Jerusalem. It was considered as an international city. It was not considered as an integral part of the land, and there was a UN discussion about it that took place in 1949, and in a very surprising way. I have no time to explain why it was so surprising, but it was very surprising at the time. Out of nowhere, at least for the Israeli side, an Australian resolution was accepted that acknowledged the 1947 partition plan and once again defined Jerusalem, both the west parts of the city and the east parts of the city, as an international city, as not as part of the Jewish state. And in an interesting way, Ben-Gurion used this opportunity to declare Jerusalem as the official capital of the state. And this is another part of the way Ben-Gurion worked, and of his attempt to make an historical problem, to make a situation which was obviously very problematic to the Israeli side, into opportunity, in this context, in the opportunity to achieve a diplomatic goal, which was very important for him, because in his mind, the resolution of the UN was so detached, was so irrelevant in the context of the actual state of things in Israel, that it was an opportunity to declare Jerusalem as a capital. So once again, I tried to give a few historical examples from the First World War to the 1948 war, in which this mechanism or this model of Ben-Gurion worked, in which Ben-Gurion faced multiple challenges or crises, immediately saw them as a challenge and not as a problem, and then trying to find the opportunity that is hidden in them. At a certain point of my things, I try to frame it in an historical way, and I said that there are these kind of leaders and other kinds of leaders. I don't want to be too political, so I won't speak about any specific figure in Israel, but looking at Israeli politics in general, in the last 2 decades or so, we don't have many Israeli leaders that speak about the future at all. Speaking about the future considered to be as quite problematic, as something that political leaders tend not to do. And I believe that this way of looking at things, looking at the future, looking at the opportunities, is much needed in the context that we are currently in.
Adi, thank you so much. Thank you for taking us on this tour de force of exploring and really opening up Ben-Gurion's innermost thoughts and visions and bringing it all up to date. Just as Avi did with the concept of unity, you did it also beautifully with with the essential leadership qualities of the first prime minister of the nation. Thank you. Thank you, Adi. And now the microphone and the screen goes to Dr. Paula Kabalo.
Thanks, Chaba. It's amazing. It's the second time we're meeting since the war began. And I guess it tells a lot about the bond, right, that we have between the Azrieli Center for Israel Studies and the Azrieli Institute for Israel Studies, and between Montreal and Ben-Gurion. So yes, it feels good to be among friends, right? So thanks for this partnership. So yes, I'll talk about security, what could be, I don't have to explain why that is relevant. I will say that I went back to Ben-Gurion's security thoughts because I felt I needed answers myself. And I'll share with you what I found. And it's pretty much preliminary findings, but I think they are quite clear. What comes out of the writings is quite clear. So the revival of Israel, according to David Ben-Gurion, was a unique case in history. It was the result of the return of the nation to its ancient homeland. And this is where Ben-Gurion begins his overview when he addresses the security problem of the state of Israel only a few years after it was established. And he explains, and I quote, the country as well as the region at large was settled by others, by the Arab people, who feel alienated by the Jewish sentiment towards this country, even though it was a constant sentiment that the Jewish people carried with it during 2,000 years of uprootedness and dispersion. This Arab point of view, Ben-Gurion claimed, should be acknowledged by Israelis and taken into consideration by Israeli policymakers because it had direct implications for the present and the future. The year is 1951, and Ben-Gurion presents these thoughts in front of the IDF High Command. This is only 3 years after the establishment of the state, and he concludes that we should not expect at this point the Arab world, with its vast territories and large population, to come to terms with the making of the state of Israel. It is this, he claimed, that makes Israel's security problem unique. He compared then the Israeli situation with the security problems faced by other countries around the world and throughout history. And he pointed out that most, if not all, conflicts between states are tied either with territorial disputes or one side aiming to subjugate another. And this leads to usually when these are the triggers for your conflicts, this leads to a more familiar, the more common tasks that state security apparatus undertake, which is to guard the borders and to maintain sovereignty. These are the two major security tasks. But Israel, according to Ben-Gurion, is dealing with something altogether different. Israel's enemies do not accept its existence. The aim, in Ben-Gurion's non-PC words in 1951, and I quote him, is to get rid of us. And this is what makes Israel's security problem unique, according to Ben-Gurion, in that talk of 1951. One wonders, and I wondered when I read this, what was he thinking when he decided to present such a pessimistic assessment? And maybe it echoes what Adi just told us about him not being very sensitive sometimes and being blunt in putting reality in front of his audience. Well, Ben-Gurion helps us in this case because it turns out that there was a coffee break after he gave the first part of his talk, and during the break, he had time to reflect on what he has just said. And he asked himself, was this a wise move? Was it a good idea to share such a pessimistic outlook with the country's security leadership? We know of his indecision because he didn't keep those thoughts to himself. Lucky us. and he shared them with his listeners. And this is what he says. During the break, I reconsidered what I said in the first part of my lecture, and I felt I'd rolled some heavy stones onto your path. Well, he continued, I'm not going to push them away. They're sitting there now, they're sitting there now. Both soldiers and politicians have a duty to see things as they are, no matter how bitter they are. And the Hebrew term is Vehiyu marim kamavet, even if they are bitter as death. Nevertheless, he then revealed another layer of his thinking, and by doing so, he provided what I define here using Shabtai Tevet terms, the double equation of his security outlook. And this is what he asks. How can we control the situation? Now that we know what the situation is, how can we control it? And he responds by doing two things: facing reality and amplifying our power. Interestingly enough, most approaches in scholarship towards Ben-Gurion's security outlook, I have to say, including myself until a month ago, focused on the second leg, the one that looked beyond military power and pointed to unity, the Negev, science, exemplary society, to mention just a few, as important sources of security. But in view of the current events, I realized we should take a better look at the first leg, which Ben-Gurion defined simply as facing reality. So today, I dedicate most of my talk to the efforts to make, to Ben-Gurion's efforts to make sure that Israel faces reality. And then I will also say a few words about the second and more familiar question: how should Israel amplify its power by means that precede military capacity? So from the establishment of the state and for the next 2 decades, Ben-Gurion repeated his hypotheses about Israel's unique security problem time and again. And in this case, there's not much change and not much adjustment, as I will demonstrate. Although he referred to changes occurring in different historical junctions, he is aware that different historical junctions are different from one another. He did not change his fundamental presupposition at all. And that is that Israel's security problem traces to its physical existence. Let's look at some examples. In 1957, in view of Israel's victory in the Sinai campaign, he warned about the next round of war. And I quote, "We mustn't be defeated. Our tragedy and our peril is that we must not suffer a defeat, because then we will be gone." In 1961, he echoed the same message in a published article. And he says, "Only Israel is surrounded on all sides by enemies that are planning to annihilate it." He uses the term hashmada, and I translated it to annihilate. They announced this intention openly. Continuing, he compared Nasser to Hitler and to the Mufti and concluded, "We mustn't bury our heads in the sand and ignore the danger. We will be able to confront any danger, and we can do so successfully only on the basis of an accurate evaluation and without deceiving ourselves about what awaits us." Ben-Gurion continued to hold these views even after the victory of 1967, of the Six-Day War, and despite the euphoria that swept Israeli society and the Jewish world. In August 1967, after praising the great victory, he echoes the phrase from Deuteronomy 12, "Only those who blind themselves fail to see the bitter truth, that we have not yet come to the rest and to the inheritance." And in Hebrew, "Lo batem adata el hamenucha ve'el hanachala." So while Israelis are swept by euphoria and Israeli generals are worshipped amid the collective loss of senses, Ben-Gurion sounds like a grumpy observer. He warns against what many Israelis were simply unwilling to hear. And this is what he says: "Our neighbors, whom our army has defeated 3 times, are unwilling to acknowledge our existence. And no one can guarantee that the Six-Day War will be our last war." So let us summarize what Ben-Gurion saw as immediate implications of Israel's unique security situation. One is that Israel must never be defeated, while its enemies have to win only once. Another implication is that the conflict will not end in the foreseeable future. Another implication is that the battles yet to come are such that military capacity must be continually adjusted. And there reflects a very realistic observation that the Arab armies will improve constantly. And Israel has to bear that in mind, and it has to make sure that its army is updated and its warfare abilities are updated. And then another implication is very interesting because he is concerned, in that other implication, he's concerned about the young generation of commanders. And he says, how will we train them to see reality? We have to educate them because unlike previous commanders, they did not live through the Holocaust. They did not live through the War of Independence. They take the state of Israel as a given, for granted. So we have to bear in mind that they don't have this anxiety built in, and they might not face reality as they should. And the last implication is that Israelis should come to terms with this reality, but at the same time, they should never stop striving for peace on the basis of strength, military strength, and additional levels of strength that I will say a few words about. So alongside this existential attitude towards the Israeli security problem, Ben-Gurion offered a second leg, or variable, and this one, as I mentioned before, has received much more attention in recent studies. It is the assertion that given these immense and unprecedented security difficulties, Israel cannot and should not rely solely on its army, and its power must rest on multifaceted infrastructure, military and civilian alike. Many of us who teach Ben-Gurion ideas and political thought have been taken by this level of discussion, myself included, I have to say, dealing with the Negev and pioneering and this whole idea of unity and internal strength. And by doing so, I'm afraid we have missed the pattern of Ben-Gurion's thinking, the double equation that has been realized also in the security, in his security thoughts. He developed I'll just say briefly that he developed the double equation in 1939 when he was passing the message that Israel, when the Jewish community of Palestine was dealing with the British withdrawal from the national home, and at the same time the British were fighting the Nazis, and so that was when he first presented the double equation. Famously, the Jewish community of Palestine has to clash with the British mandate, fight against the white book of the British mandate, and at the same time join the British in their war against the Nazis. And he said, yes, it's a dual paradigm, but we have to do both. The best illustration of this biased research, the fact that we were mostly concentrated on the second leg rather than the first one, is demonstrated in the analysis of Ben-Gurion's attitude to the Negev. His most famous phase of the Negev is, in the Negev, the people of Israel will be tested, and refers to the amplifying idea of making the desert bloom. But Ben-Gurion was not less concerned about the existential role of the Negev as the only land reservoir that could protect the coastal plain. And the title of my talk today is one out of many quotes in which he, in fact, warns from concentrating the population of Israel in Tel Aviv, and he even doesn't hesitate to I would say to envision some very dark, pessimistic scenarios that could happen if most of Israel's population is concentrated in such a small territory. 1.5 million Jews are concentrated in a few urban clusters, he says. This causes danger. The concentration of this majority in such a small area threatens the whole state. It is very easy to wipe away Tel Aviv and its surrounding at once. And if that happens, the state is lost. So bluntly putting the Negev as an existential goal. Thus, he embraced full-heartedly the double equation in his approach to the security challenges. Israel should face reality that its enemies aim to annihilate it, using his words, and at the same time ensure a multifaceted, not solely military, enhancement of power, such as striving for internal unity, as we heard today, cultivating ties with the Jewish world, investing in high technology, and of course, developing the Negev. A sober reading of Ben-Gurion's security hypotheses takes us back to both parts of the equation. Searching for answers while looking back doesn't necessarily mean that all hypotheses from early statehood are still intact. Neither, however, it means that they are not. It means that we should remind ourselves time and again of how the founders of Israel understood the reality that they were facing, and thus I believe we can and should use their perspectives as guidelines for a better understanding of current times.
Thank you very much, Paula, and thanks indeed to each and every one of our speakers. It is 10 minutes past 2 o'clock in Montreal, and it's getting very late for our friends in Israel. So with your permission, I would just ask you to maybe stay with us for another 15, 20 minutes. I promise to let you go no later than 2 o'clock Montreal time. And let me look at the chat to see what questions have been received. And there were 2 that were submitted during the talk. I'm going to share those as they were addressed to particular speakers. And if anybody else from the audience would like to raise questions, please drop them in the chat box. So the first question was for Avi. Avi, and the question has to do with the influence, if any, of the little Shoah, the little Holocaust of Ukraine in the early part of the 20th century, 1918 to 20, on Ben-Gurion. And if you can draw any parallel maybe between that event and the current massacre, the pogrom that happened on October 7th. And there was a question that we received also addressing Adi. Adi, the question is, what are your comments about Ben-Gurion's ignoring the mandate of 1922 in September 1939? I think you're muted, Avi.
See. Well, this question, the question of what was called by you as the little Holocaust, meaning the mass massacres that took place during the civil war in Ukraine by the end of the World War I, is a riddle. It's a riddle, but it's a general riddle, because I keep asking myself and my colleagues, how come that the Jewish people forgot this little Holocaust so fast? And people keep answering me and saying, okay, the big Holocaust made it overshadow it. No, the Jews forgot all about it during the 30s or during the 20s. We don't find, as far as I can judge, I'm not saying it's the final judgment. As far as I can, as far as I can see, this was silenced very, very fast. Now, this is, I do think it's a riddle. It says something about us as a people. We don't know if it was 100,000 or 200. There are some estimates that are talking about 200,000. There is very little research about it. We don't know, but the most, so there is, people don't research it, but people forget it in real time after this little Holocaust. Now, it's a riddle. If you're asking me about Ben-Gurion, I would say, firstly, this little Holocaust is the beginning of what I called the ongoing developing crisis of the Jewish people in Europe. This is the first catastrophe. Then you have the regime in Poland of the anti-Semitic regime in Poland much before Hitler, and other places like Romania and Hungary. And then you have Germany, and these are the main outstanding. It's not the whole picture. So it's the beginning of the crisis that ended in the Holocaust. But it was forgotten, and it was forgotten in real time. And if you're asking me about Ben-Gurion, I can say only this: it precedes Ben-Gurion's ascendance to leadership, because he only began to the first party he led was established in 1919. He was the leader of the Istadrut only in 1920. He just started his journey to become, after 15 years, to become the leader of the Jewish issue. The response of the Zionist movement was that, under Weizmann, was that Palestine or Eretz Israel is not capable to absorb refugees from Ukraine. Weizmann resisted calls to open the land of Israel to mass immigration from Ukraine. Our colleague Gur published a very important article about it in UNIM. But this article is one of the few researchers I know about this. So if my short answer after this long answer is that if you're asking about Ben-Gurion, I don't know. I never had I didn't see any response of Ben-Gurion's about it. I think it was at the time he was a soldier, and I don't know.
Avi, before I would turn it over to Adi, we received another comment which directly relates to this. So let me just share that. It's a comment by Olga Petrova. Thank you for joining us, who is pointing out recent work by Jeffrey Weidlinger about the pogroms and ongoing research about Jewish self-defense. So just wanted to read out the comment since it engages the same topics. So
it was not familiar to me. Yeah. Thank you. Olga.
Thank you so much. And Adi, over to you.
First of all, I can only assess. Ben-Gurion, I don't have his reasoning, but I believe that in 1939, the mandate, the conditions of the mandate was considered as a failure, meaning that in 1939, the Jews of the land of Israel, of the Yeshuv, felt that this agreement, the raison d'etat of the mandate administration, was misused in many ways. We're speaking about a time where the white paper avoided Jews from Europe to escape into Palestine, and therefore I believe that Ben-Gurion preferred to point out at the Balfour Declaration as a success, and not on the 1922 mandate conditions as a success. So this is my answer to this question.
Thank you very much, Adi. And there is one other comment or rather question in the chat box. But before I would turn to that, let me maybe engage Paula briefly on a provocative notion. And maybe it's more provocative in my mind, but it is going to be provocative because we are talking with scholars from Ben-Gurion University. So raising comparisons with Jabotinsky might sound very sacrilegious. But Paula, as I'm listening to you and your description of Ben-Gurion's security conceptions, the emphasis on strength, military strength, importantly, but not just, and the concept of unity, I mean, these are terms that figure prominently in Jabotinsky's thought. Any thoughts, any reactions, any clarifications?
I have to say, I was surprised myself, and that's the first thing that came to mind to me. the bluntness that he describes, and the bluntness and the non-flexible. I would say what he calls facing reality, and the consistency of his analysis of what that reality is about, which is the reality is that our security problems are not about borders and are not about one part wanting to subjugate the other. It's about not accepting our existence. And yes, I'm not an expert of Jabotinsky, but I am a little bit expert of Zionism in Israel. And yes, that's basically what Jabotinsky says. And there is an echoing here. I would say that maybe he made sure to have his two legs on the ground, the two sides of the equation. And maybe that's why I would say that in all of his, I said, well, I want to say most, but I am tempted to say all. In all of the articles and speeches that I have been reading in the last, I was following Ben-Gurion's security talks in front of security officials. And in all of them, he makes sure to have both sides of the equation. And I think that that's maybe a different approach than the one of Jabotinsky, but I'm not sure, I have to say, but at least in terms of emphasizing maybe settlement. And of course, we have to remember that the time that he is living is after the establishment of the state. So he's talking about they are not living in the same time. So Ben-Gurion, as the prime minister at the time, also wants to ensure that Israel develops. So that's why science and technology and so on. But yes, it's not a provocative question, I have to say. It's a very reasonable question to ask, and I asked myself the same one, which, of course, I have to say, and maybe I'll conclude with this, that it makes me want to go back to other leaders and ask myself, did we miss that part in their, because did other leaders see this presupposition like Ben-Gurion?
That's a wonderful invitation for further research. Thank you, Paula. Thank you for the engagement. There is one general question, which is an invitation to all of you, and maybe think that maybe it's more clearly perhaps targeting the concept of unity. This is a question by Cornelia D'Ambrosio, and Cornelia is asking if the opportunity of social media and the flurry of opinions published these days, whether it's at all possible to converge towards unity, or will diversity prevail? So it's a very interesting and important question to update or bring the clash between the contrast between unity and diversity to the current context. And another question from our PhD student at Concordia, Milena Kartovsky-Ashi. And Milena's question is for Paula. Up to the legacy of Ben-Gurion regarding its premonitory concern about the constant improvement of the Arab armies in the future, and the existential necessity of the Israeli army to be ready and updated, what happened on the 7th of October? How come so many units don't have nowadays the necessary war equipments and so on? And there is a lot that can be obviously packed into it's a very important question about what happened. How could October 7th happen? And one more question, and this will be the last one because we are going to have to let our speakers go, from Jadip Prabhu. Thank you for joining us, Jadip, today. And this is also a question for Paula. But when I say that, of course, it's an invitation both to Adi and Avi to chip in. Is there an evolution in the view of Arabs in Ben-Gurion's thought from the 1910s all the way to the 1940s? And if so, what motivated this change, this evolution? Other leaders such as Herzl before and Jabotinsky before seem to flirt with the idea of coexistence. What about Ben-Gurion?
Can I go first, and then we'll open the
Yeah, sure. So in the second round, you can definitely go first, and then Avi Adi.
I think that I'll start by saying that I don't pretend to be an expert in military or security, let's say, affairs nowadays. Okay, so but I'll tell you what I see, and what we see as Israelis is a very strong army. In fact, we see an army that has advanced equipment and has all the abilities, or a very impressive abilities, to do warfare. So the question then becomes even bigger, and this question, in fact, this is exactly the question that led me to this research. And the answer, I think it's Milena who asked it, right? Was it Milena? So I'll tell you, Milena, this was exactly what led me to this research, because I said what happened here? And I have to say, and this is okay, I'm going to give you this is my personal, let's say my personal subjective evaluation, okay? In a way, I feel that we gave up the first part of the equation. So I think that we were not concerned enough about the intentions of our enemies. So I think what we called conceptia, it was our state of mind. And when I read what Ben-Gurion says about the future generational commanders and how are we going to keep their state of mind, how are we going to keep them alert, I felt he was talking about us, not necessarily about our commanders, about us as an Israeli society that invested everything it needed in being strong and advanced, and many beautiful things that have to do with current day pioneering and the thriving of the Negev. But the first leg was kind of diminished, almost ignored. And that is to remember or to acknowledge the intentions of others about us. So it's not a very optimistic note, but this is the way I understand it, using Ben-Gurion, leaning on Ben-Gurion. As for JDIP, I think Ben-Gurion one has to understand Ben-Gurion until 36, until the Arab revolt and after. Or maybe a little bit even before, yes, around that, mid-30s. So when he starts his talk with Arab leaders, okay? So when he's a little bit before that, but around that time. So when he's elected to be the chair of the Jewish Agency, one of the first things that he does is he meets with Arab leaders, all kinds of Arab personalities from different places, not all of them from Palestine, some of them from Lebanon and other places. And those are documented in the famous book called My Talks with Arab Leaders. And one of the things that you see there is that he realizes how deep the gaps are and how unbridgeable they are, at least not in that moment. And I think that is when the way I see it, the way I understand it, is that from that moment on, he changes his frame of thinking from trying to bridge to making sure to the more Jabotinsky, let's say, approach of putting a wall and making it clear that we're here to stay.
Epicon were post up. One of the articles of Ben-Gurion that I really like, called "What is Not to Learn from the 1956 War," and this is typical to Ben-Gurion's thought. And the bottom line of this article is that we must understand that Israel's enemies are learning and advancing, and they're not standing in their place. Our mission is to do the same, but quicker. And another, let's say, symbol that we can, or metaphor that we can find in Ben-Gurion's writings, is the speaking about Israel's qualitative advantage and quantitative disadvantage. And there is an interesting military scholar in Israel called Meir Finkel And his theory basically saying that Israel has changed the way that it understands qualitative advantage. Well, qualitative advantage used to be understood as a human advantage, and the focus of the IDF and the focus of society was developing the best persons, the best soldiers, the best commanders. In many ways, in the 90s, there was a change towards a different understanding of quality and moving the focus into technology. And this is the tactical failure that we saw in the Gaza border. It was based on technology and not on human resources, but it's much deeper. It's much deeper because the Israeli society have stressed the place of technology, of high tech, in a way that forgot the basics, and the basics are the humans, the people. And I would also like to take it into the general question about unity. Mm-hmm. We're not speaking enough about people, about humans. We're speaking about the rifts in Israeli society, and we're speaking about sectors and political parties, etc., but we're not speaking about people. And let me tell you something. If you sit in a family dinner table in Israel, you will find people that have different political views. The rifts are inside families. The rifts are inside the dinner table. And therefore, as I see it, the rift is not very deep. I won't say it's not very deep because it is deep, but you can bridge it more easily than you think, because this is questions of brothers and sisters in the symbolic way, and in the actual meaning of brothers and sisters that debate. And therefore, I believe that unity is possible. The only thing that we need to do is to get back and speak about the humans and speak about the people.
Thank you, Adi. Beautifully spoken. Thank you. Avi, over to you. Avi, I think you're mute.
Yeah. I owe an answer to Cornelia D'Ambrosio, but before that, I want to stress something that Paula already said and highlight it in a way. Intention, I think, it's very identifying intentions is highly important in Ben-Gurion's legacy in foreign affairs. I think Paula mentioned the 30s and so on. It's very important, and I want to explain it in the terms of our current failure during the initial failure of the October 7th. The fact that people, I think that the army, the commanders of the army and the intelligence tended to overlook the obvious genocidal intentions of Hamas. We all knew it, but it's not new. It's not something we didn't know. They tended to overlook it, and because they were. It's as old as war. They tended to underestimate the actual potency of Hamas, of the Palestinians in Gaza. They saw Hamas as a weak enemy, so we can overlook his intentions, and this is a mistake. I think this is the core mistake here. Now, as to the Cornelia D'Ambrosio question about social media, I think it's vis-a-vis the question of unity. It's a very important topic question. I think the social media fosters divisive propaganda. It's an amplifier of divisive propaganda. We are living in an era of I don't think I think the weight of propaganda, misleading propaganda, propaganda that seeks to divert people from reality is the weight nowadays is much stronger, much influencing than ever because of the social media, and we are witnessing. In fact, to my point, I'm not an expert in social psychology, but I think we are witnessing a phenomena of social psychosis because of the effect of the social media, and it is of course it is highly divisive. I think this is taking place not only in Israel but all over the democratic world, and it is also it is also weaponized by the enemy, the Russians, the Arabs in our place. We can see influences like this, and this is something that. It worries us. I think it worries many, and we have to think about ways to deal with this because it's a real threat. It's a real threat to the cohesiveness of our society. I think every democratic society.
Avi, thank you very much. In fact, this is now my. The time has come to wrap up the session. It's very, very rich and intellectually engaging and challenging, thought-provoking discussion. But before I would do that, I would like to share a few very important thank yous with everyone. First and foremost, I would like to thank Corey Newman, our social media and communications advisor, who is making all the preparations in the background to make sure that we can meet here in virtual space together, and that members of the audience can also find us. So thank you, Corey. Would also like to, of course, say a huge thank you to our speakers, Drs. Paula Kabalo, Avi Bareli, Adi Sherzer, for initiating the discussion, as Paula, you did, indeed, as you said already, the second time during this short, very turbulent month since the war, since the pogrom, the massacre that brought the war on us, on Israel. So thank you, and thank you for making yourselves available in bringing together this very rich opening session of the three-part series. And of course, a huge thank you to the institutions that participated in making this possible. Paula, your own Mali, the Azrieli Center for Israel Studies, of course, the Ben-Gurion University's De Boker Research Institute for Zionism and the history of the State of Israel. The Canadian Associates of Ben-Gurion University. I want to again give kudos and offer thanks to Simon Ben-Simon, who very readily jumped on the idea to help make it possible. And Simon also joined us today in the audience. And as I mentioned earlier, the Startup Nation, the new Concordia University Student Club, that specifically promotes issues of interest for our Israeli students here in Montreal. So thank you, everyone. I would also like to say thank you and also encourage members of the audience to come back for part 2. That will be a week from today on November 20th for the second part of this three-part series, when we will talk about the understanding of the Zionist idea, or rather Zionist ideas. A very important question that we will propel further our discussion about Israel studies after October 7th. Good night to our Israeli friends, and good
many warm thanks to our Canadian friends. We're looking forward to more activities together.
And so are we.
Thank you, Chaba. Thank you, Chaba. It was a big treat to see you again.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Stay safe, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
Yeah. Good night, everybody.